everyone, thanks for tuning in today. I'm Nicole Forbes with Dennis's 7Ds, and today we are talking about beginning an organic veggie garden. As with all of our classes, there is a digital copy of a handout that is just a supplemental piece of information. You can find it as a hyperlink just below the description of this video, and if you have any problems finding it, please mention that in the comment section and we will be sure to make a direct link for you for the handout. The information that I want to share with you today is, well, first of all, there's a lot of information, so you will want to have the handout to refer back to, but we're going to talk in some generalities so that we can just simply, get you started on the down the road of growing food organically. And because of where we are in the season right now, it being early April, the crops that we're going to talk about mostly in growing for this time of year are the appropriate cool season crops, not yet our summer veggies. So we're not yet talking about eggplants and melons, corns and tomatoes, but we're talking more about root crops and greens, and of course peas are a perfect spring vegetable as well. So that's one lesson, I guess, that is part of kind of the whole topic of edible gardening and growing at home, is that there's a season for planting. There's an appropriate time for planting certain crops, and if you jump the gun, of course, you'll find your plants struggle because of cold soil or hail and just like too cold of weather conditions above ground, but also below ground. We're waiting for that soil to warm up, so you can jump the gun and plant too early, jeopardizing your little plantings. Or in some cases, if you plant too late in the season, you'll simply run out of time before the end of our growing season to have a successful harvest. So timing is critical. But what I want to really share today is, like I said, some more generalities of, you're just buying a house and you want to figure out where to put your garden beds, and then of course you're going to fill them up and start growing. So, or you finally decided that there's too much lawn and you're tired of mowing it. You want to convert some lawn into vegetable growing space. Two great examples of where you may be today. Perhaps you are a long-term gardener and just want to up your game with a little bit of like a refresher knowledge. So that's another great person who may be watching today. So yeah, let's kind of get into this because, like I said, lots to learn. We will turn more to specifics of warmer season vegetables at the end of this month. So at the end of April, we have a class on growing tomatoes to really hone in on tomato growing and warmer season crops specifically. But what I have in front of me today is a really nice, just fresh, delicious collection of greens. Flashy trout black, which is a romaine style. This is Merlot, which is a red leaf lettuce. And then a standard romaine pack as well. Romanesco, which is kind of it's a brassica, sort of like cauliflower gone wild. Spirally different shapes of cauliflower, very cool, very fun to grow because it's not something you find all the time in the grocery store. Good old lacinato kale, so on everybody's shopping list probably. Some Swiss chard, beets, some peas, and carrots. Over here, tucked into the pocket next to the warming fabrics and things, I do have a couple of tomatoes and a basil, only to remind me, just kind of tell you to slow your roll on these guys over here, but we will be talking about them just very soon. So breaking down vegetable gardening is pretty simple. We're talking about where to put, where do we put the plants? Where do we grow our vegetable garden? So where is the best location to grow it if you have options? Sometimes you don't have any options at all. So, your balcony is facing the direction your balcony is facing, and you're going to try to grow some plants off of that balcony, for example. that may be your only choice. So you may be locked into a spot, or you may be searching for a location. And then, of course, you're going to ask yourself, do I try to like dig up all this grass and create get the tiller and create an in-ground garden space, or go for raised beds? Next question, of course. Once you've got that established, how's my soil? Or do I need to buy soil? Where do I get it? What do I buy? Followed by, what do I plant? What do I want to grow? And what, as I mentioned, are the timing steps for me to know as far as when to plant what according to the season. So starting with, again, kind of some of the more common missteps or mistakes that are made by new gardeners. Number one is planting in a space that does not provide enough sun. Or just choosing a poor site in general. Poor soil, if it used to be a car park, or like a dog run, or something that's had a ton of foot traffic, that soil is going to be really compacted. So it's going to need some renovation, some loosening to be able to sustain the kind of the high organic soil that is required by vegetables. So number one, what has happened in that soil, if you know it, and the amount of sun. 6 hours of direct sunlight on your vegetable garden area, or more than 6 hours, is going to be ideal for growing the widest range of crops. 6 hours or more of sun will allow you to grow pretty much anything that can be grown in our zone, for example. But if you have less than 6 hours, you'll be better off choosing plants that don't produce a fruit or a vegetable, so to speak, but more leafy greens. So things that you're just going to eat the foliage of will usually do fairly well in filtered or indirect sun, or kind of like dappled shade or sun where there is less than that 6 hours. Same again, and I will talk a couple weeks from now about tomato varieties. Smaller varieties of tomatoes, cherry tomatoes, tend to do better in less sun, and the big beefsteak style tomatoes really are the ones that require that 6 hours or more of sun. So site selection, selecting an appropriate site. Now, second common mistake is not fertilizing, not feeding your plants, and not adding amendments to the soil. So let me just run through the rest of these. Third, planting too early and choosing poor quality transplants. So improper timing, as I already kind of alluded to. Planting too many seeds or transplants too close together, like not spacing properly and not thinning to the correct distance as your plants mature. Another really common mistake. And then finally, believe it or not harvesting frequently enough, especially in hot weather. Your plants will tend to kind of just fizzle out and stop producing if you don't keep picking from them on a regular basis. So backing up again, site selection, as I mentioned. The sun is one thing, but now what's the soil all about? I mean, clearly, if it has already been an established vegetable garden space, then lucky you. You may just need to take a soil test, find out what nutrients are lacking, and go ahead and amend your soil as you're planting, and just kind of, go with it for the first season and see how things work out. If you are, if it's early April and you're looking at lawn and you want to turn it into a vegetable garden and you're a beginner, I would say the fastest road to success from that situation would be to lay some weed fabric down over the lawn area and put raised beds on top, so that you have complete control over the soil that goes in, that's weed free and of higher nutrition. And again, not having to remove and do all the work of removing sod and then loosening soil and then doing your soil test and trying to figure things out You will be possibly, planting at the end of summer, but it still could be a year or two of mitigated success while you're trying to raise the soil health and kind of overall what we call tilth, just like, good soil is like crumbly and dark and rich, and yucky soil is kind of like cloddy and mucky and poor color, for example. So it doesn't happen overnight to change your soil if you're working in the ground. So best rate of success is going to come from folks using raised beds. It is like any size, raised bed is fine. And sometimes you're working with an existing space. But if you're starting on your own, a raised bed that is no wider than 4 feet, no deeper, so to speak, or wider than 4 feet is ideal, so that you can reach across the bed from both sides and manage to weed, plant, and maintain that garden space without having to get into or walk across the bed. So too wide, too big of a bed, and you can't reach it from the edge. You really want to avoid stepping or walking in a raised vegetable garden bed, or even in your own in-ground garden bed. Once you've gotten that soil nice and loose and airy, stepping in it is going to leave like deep sunken footprints and compact the soil, which just makes it hard for little seedlings and water to, make their way through. So we want it to be nice and loose and fluffy. So 4 by whatever, 4 by 8 is kind of a nice size. 4 by 10 is a great size for a raised garden bed. And because another advantage of raised garden beds is because it's rainy and our soil is clay-based, it does not dry out as quickly as looser soil does. And in-ground soil stays a little bit colder, even on a day like today where it's going to warm up significantly. A raised bed that's out of the ground is going to really warm up from the sunny day today. Compared to in-ground soil, it will warm some, but the temperatures aren't going to rise and swing quite as dramatically in the ground as they do in raised beds. So raised beds dry out and become workable earlier in the spring, and also they warm up faster in the spring season. So that is an advantage of giving you, an earlier planting time, for example. Also, raised beds, as I mentioned, the first year for sure should have no weed seeds, few pests or insects in the soil, and of a good starter nutritional base. So that gives you all of the advantages. We carry a raised bed soil blend that you can use to fill your raised beds. It comes in a large kind of bale-sized planter. This is an all-organic soil that's just called raised bed and potting mix. It has a nutrient package in it, but it is really more filler than high premium nutritional soil. So I like to recommend the product that I have sitting just below it. I'd like to not have to pick up these big heavy bags today, but this is Harvest Supreme, which is a soil amendment that I would add at least 1 Harvest Supreme to every 2 raised bed mixes to increase the nutrient level in the soil. Harvest Supreme is a soil builder, and it has 15% chicken manure added to it. So that starts to give us some of that increased nutrition that our vegetables are going to want as they grow. It is common that we, raised beds or not, once you start adding things like manure, compost, purchased bulk soil that you work hard, to move that big pile from the front curb to the back with your wheelbarrow and fill your boxes or whatever, it's very natural to think like, done now with the dirty part of gardening. Now I'm just going to plant and have fun with these green things. However, the job is not over by just filling your boxes with high quality garden soil. So going back again to most common beginner mistake number one is not testing your soil and not adding fertilizer and nutrition as you're planting, as well as throughout the growing season. When we consider vegetables, annual vegetable crops, they're basically going to do all their growth, come out of a seed this year, do all their growth this season, reproduce the future generations, and then die in frost. These plants have a crazy life. Their whole life cycle is condensed into a single, not even a year, a single like 4-month season, 5-month season. And so they're incredibly hardworking organisms. They are, I consider our vegetable plants, we want them to produce and produce and produce. I think of them as athletes. We want them to be at the top of their game, the peak performance. And what the performance is that they're doing is reproduction, right? So a tomato makes a fruit because it's got seeds inside, and that's going to make a new tomato. Same with a carrot. Same with, lettuce, for example. Where do lettuce seeds come from? Lettuce, after the flowers grow, after the leaves grow, spikes up and makes a tall flower spike with little flowers on it that ripen into seeds and become lettuce as they fall to the ground. So all of these plants want to complete their life cycle. And so, being athletic in itself requires like a focus of nutrition. Most really, top of their game athletes, Olympic athletes, have like a, sports coach and a nutritional coach and a total like plan of what they're eating and how they're eating and when they're eating next. And the same with pregnancy. So again, pregnancy requires specific attention to nutrition. Reproduction in general requires additional nutrients from an organism. So when we think of these plants as pregnant athletes, we need to feed them and we need to think about what they're eating and what nutrients are available to them. Beyond that, the more nutritious we grow them, wouldn't that mean that the more nutritious they are for us as we ingest them? So one of the keys to determining the health of your soil and the fertility of your soil is a basic home soil test. So this is a soil test kit that is great for home gardening because this gives you multiple rechecks of the different nutrients you can test. So you could test each of these nutrients 10 times or 10 separate areas in your garden, for example. I like to do a test kind of at the beginning of the season or even in the fall to find out what my soil is like, giving me time then to add amendments or make changes. And then maybe in 3 months or 5 months, test again to gauge the changes that have had the effect, what the changes have had effect on in the soil. This is like if you have a pool or a spa, you're doing this pH stuff already. It's like 8th grade basic science and some color matching. And it's got like beakers and droppers, and it's fun, dare I say, if you're scientifically inclined. You're going to measure nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, as well as the basic pH, acidity or alkalinity of your garden soil. And the package itself then also gives you a readout of kind of what soil pH and what average nutrient rankings many of our commonly grown vegetables and garden crops are. So you take your soil test, you can see, for example, it would tell us that we may have a sufficient level of phosphorus or that we may be deficient in nitrogen. Now that tells us, or maybe we're perfect. Maybe it's perfect. First year, straight from the, grinding factory, and you get this fresh, new made soil and you put it in your garden bed. Maybe right away it has everything that the plants need. But as plants use that up out of the soil, there's not a lot that's replenishing it. So as plants grow throughout the season, even in a perfect starting point, chances are good that you'll need to replenish and feed the plants as they grow. The easiest, most kind of obvious fertilizer to use for your vegetable garden would be an organic bag of tomato, vegetable, and herb fertilizer. It's clear as day, tells you exactly what can be used for. The instructions are easy to understand as far as the quantities that you're using, either by individual plant or per 10 square foot. Either that's 1 foot by 10, or like a 3 by 3 space is about 10 square feet. So it tells you how much to apply for each of those types of areas. It's a granular fertilizer, which means that it's slow to break down. It's like a breakfast, lunch, dinner type meal for the plants. Feeds for 6 weeks, or even in some cases 8 weeks. So you would put it in as planting, determined by, of course, the need after you've done your soil test. You can put it right in the hole, or in a side trench even next to what you're planting. Because it's organic, it won't burn your plants, so you can just mix it in at the bottom of the hole, plant your plant, backfill with the rest of your garden soil, and then 6 weeks down the line, 8 weeks down the line, when you need to reapply, you'll top dress with that granular fertilizer. Or top dress would be like circling the plant with the granular stuff around the ground. Or if you've got a long linear row, you can basically put the fertilizer right in front of or on the sides of the row. That's called side dressing, where you're going to just sprinkle that organic fertilizer down the row, because it works faster when it's buried just a little bit into the soil. You can scratch it in just a hair into the soil, or if you've got a layer of mulch, you want to pull back the mulch or scratch it into the mulch, and then water that granular fertilizer in right away. And by watering it in right away, it's going to begin to go into solution and start breaking down. There's water-soluble nutrients that are in there that'll come out right away, and then there are non-water soluble nutrients in an organic fertilizer that can take up to like 3 weeks to even start being available to plants. The little microbes in our soil help to break down and metabolize, decompose, and make available the nutrients to our plants. So this organic fertilizer also contains beneficial soil microbes. So it tells us right here that it's full of probiotics. And the warmer the soil gets, the faster all of this, the more active our soil becomes. The more active the microbes are in warmer soil, and the faster the chemical kind of breakdown and decomposition process occurs, cycling those nutrients to our plants faster as they also are growing more rapidly in warm weather. It is, if you refer back to last week's class, to fertilizing class a couple weeks back, we did a class on plant nutrition. If you refer back to that class, you can get way more details on what all the numbers mean on your fertilizers, and what basic nutrition really is all about for plants. But if you do go to the extent or the efforts of taking a soil home test, you can either take pictures of your results or jot down your results and come in and talk to us about what your soil test told you and what you want to grow, and we can help bridge the gap between what needs to be applied or what you need to do in response to those readings. Now, as I mentioned, soil temperature. Soil temperature has a huge impact, not only on the soil microbes, as I mentioned, the little microbes and mycorrhizae, bacteria and fungi in the soil, the insects and other worms and other critters that live in the soil, the nutrient cycle, the decomposition of the nutrients, how effective and efficiently our fertilizer decomposes. But when the temperature of our soil also indicates when seeds will sprout, how well plants will do when they're planted into that soil. And in many cases, we can use a soil thermometer practically in place of a calendar and take your reading from the soil thermometer to help you to determine what can be planted and when. And the soil thermometer is probably one, it is one of my most essential tools. So recently I wrote a little article about my most essential tools when I go out and garden, and this one almost didn't get included because I always leave it in the soil. So it's always down in the ground. This little green knot sticks up above the ground, and I always tell people I have 3 of these because I've lost them in the garden. What's the green? Why would you paint it with a green knot? Paint it with your hot pink or reddish nail polish, or spray paint it, day glow yellow, whatever you can do to find it in your garden, because it's going to be right down at the soil level, and it just magically disappears. I mean, they could have done worse if they made it brown, but green, come on, you guys. But it's otherwise like indestructible. Metal framework, it goes from negative, so minus 10 degrees to 120 degrees is the range of reading on it. And it takes like 3 to 5 minutes to get it to register in the soil. So you can stick it in and like pull some weeds, go back and find out what your soil is. But like I mentioned, I leave mine in place so that I can just pop out in the morning and pull my little thermometer. Sometimes I have to scratch a little bit of dirt off the window and see what the temperature is. So the soil temperature this morning was 49 degrees in the ground, and it was 52 degrees in raised beds. So there's the swing, there's the difference. One of the advantages of seeing those raised beds warm up. On the back of this fabulous tool, the soil thermometer gives you a readout of temperatures. One of the readouts is the soil temperature in which seeds will sprout. So if it's 30 degrees in the soil, a pea is not going to even wake up. It's just going to rot away and wish you were smarter. In 40 degree soil, a pea will consider sprouting, and in 45 degree soil, peas are going to grow. But when you see on a package of peas, for example, the days to germinate, and territorial seeds usually give us even the soil temperature on the packet. So soil temperature for this packet of peas is 45 to 75 degrees. So we are definitely warm enough for peas to germinate now in the soil. But the days to germinate, the days for the pea to crack out of the seed, are either 8 days to 25 days or somewhere in between. Now the factor that determines how quickly that seed will germinate is the soil temperature. So because we go back to that soil temperature window when it says from 45 degrees to 75 degrees, the lower end of the soil temperature threshold is going to make it closer to 25 days before those peas come out of the ground. But if we are up to that 75 degree temperature and put our peas in about 8 days, they would be out of the ground. So they should germinate faster as it's warmer and slower in cooler soil. And peas don't want to germinate in soil that's hotter than 75. So peas are one of those cool season vegetables, and the soil at one point gets just too hot, and the soil gets too hot and the seeds will not sprout. So the soil thermometer tells us the window in which a huge range of crops will germinate, from asparagus and beans to tomato and watermelon, all the way down alphabetical. Then there's a ideal germination window, so a temperature at which seeds will sprout the fastest. And the last column they give you is the temperature that the soil should be for putting transplants out into the garden. So for lettuce, putting transplants of lettuce out, well, they don't tell us because lettuce is best sown from seed. Whatever, you could put transplants out. Now, The window for lettuce to germinate is 40 to 75 degrees, and the ideal temperature for lettuce is 75 degrees. On the other hand, tomato, this is Oregon Spring, so this is a tomato that was bred for our climate, for the very conditions that we're experiencing right now. It was developed at OSU. It's a short, so it's a bush tomato, like a determinate, which means it's short. It puts all of its fruit out at one time over like a 3-week period. So you can do lots of canning or salsa with it, and then it's done. And it matures in 60 days. So like get in and get out with an Oregon Spring, but even this guy, it's still too cold to put an Oregon Spring tomato out in 49, even 52 degree garden soil. I wouldn't consider doing it. The thermometer tells us for a tomato that the transplanting seedling temperature would be 60 degrees. So we're not quite, even in my raised beds, not quite to 60 degrees. We'll be talking about planting tomatoes closer to Mother's Day once our soil has really warmed up. Putting warm season crops in cold soil causes them to get like that, you know, when you just like get chilled to the bone and then you just cannot warm up. That's how the plants feel if they go into soil that's too cold. So it can actually like stunt their growth and like retard their progress compared to a tomato even that would be planted later in better timing will catch up to and outgrow a tomato that's planted too early. They just shiver and forever kind of rue the day you planted them. So soil thermometer, critical tool for vegetable gardening. Just pick it out, pull it out of the soil, and it tells you exactly what you could plant today. I check mine, like I mentioned, regularly, and that helps me to kind of know, track the progress in my soil and know what I can plant. In addition, since I'm running through my favorite tools and it's highly related to this very project, when I go out to weed and kind of, you know, get my garden ready for planting, which I just did a couple weeks ago, pulled up some of my last winter crops and harvested some, like a cabbage and some broccoli and a couple of parsnips. Then, you know, pulled the weeds. I had cover crop that needed to be turned under the soil. So I was turning cover crop and loosening the soil itself, pulling away some mulch and just wanting to kind of get it loose and ready for gardening. And so when I do all of that, I use this garden fork. So it's a little bit of a shorter handled tool, you can see, compared to like a shovel or a spade. But the garden fork with the D handle is actually meant to be used like standing straight up, and then you can press just a straight vertical down into the soil with the fork. They come with different lengths of tines, so usually have 4 tines or more. This is whatever, 9 inches maybe, probably tells me. This is a shorter tine. Mine have a little bit longer tines to allow me to just go a little bit deeper into the soil. But push straight into the soil with that nice deep D handle, and then you just take a step backwards and use a fulcrum action, kind of just lever action. And what that's doing is pushing down into the soil and then lifting a patch of soil, just like fluffing it. Now, that goes a long ways in, first of all, making it easier to then pull out weeds, because I've just loosened soil deeply and the roots then come out much easier. That nice looser soil is easier to dig in, easier for young seedlings or transplants to start rooting out into. And water penetrates more easily into that loose soil. It's going to warm up faster once it's kind of looser and there's more air pockets between the little granular bits of soil. So we're going to see that warm up faster than really dense compacted soil. And when we go about it more aggressively, whether that is with a tiller or, you know, a big double digging shovel or spade frenzy, you do a lot of work to dig all that soil. And in many cases, what happens is weed seeds that were buried deeper down in the soil are brought to the surface when we flip soil. And so if they're too far down in the dark, they are too dark, too cold to germinate. But if we bring weed seeds back up to the surface, the next thing that happens is you're ready to, you dug it up last weekend, you're ready to go out and plant this weekend, and you walk out into your garden space and you have a fine fuzz of new weeds that have all started to germinate because of that flipping or turning of the soil, or even of the big tilling. Not that you don't, in many cases, have to till up a new garden plot. So if you were back to like what I was talking about before, starting with turf or lawn, you got to get a sod cutter, remove all the lawn. Now you do most likely have to start by doing some tilling and loosening that soil to help even incorporate some organic amendments and organic matter into the area by turning or tilling. But as my garden bed, for example, has been worked for 20 years. So the soil is of high quality. And now I just need to fluff it up after winter rain and, not growing anything. Maybe it's gotten just a little bit compacted. And yeah, a couple of weeds are, in there too. So the garden fork is truly the best tool for me to just quickly go through and get a garden bed well fluffed and aerated. And you can also use that in raised beds because of that nice shorter handle. This, when I no longer am doing standing work, when I am on my hands and knees gardening, this is a Hori knife, and it is my best friend. It replaces a ton of other hand tools in the garden. It is it's dipped enough that you can move soil with it, so it's just fine as a trowel or a little micro shovel, right? It's fabulous for digging and makes this nice deep hole, actually up to, it's actually 7 inches deep, but it has 6 inches marked onto the blade. It cuts through roots if you need. You can sharpen these even further, but it'll quickly, cut a string if you need that as well. Slice into the edge of a root ball if you're kind of loosening roots when planting. But the measurements that are on the blade, I use when I'm spacing plants in the garden instead of, guessing or going and getting a tape measure or a yardstick or something like that. So 6 inches at a time is just enough for me. The Hori knife does have this little sheath holster that I never seem to, I just like carry mine around bare, but I should have it in the holster because then it would be with me all the time, like my pruners. But if you want to gift yourself an awesome gardening tool or gift somebody else an awesome gardening tool, check first, because if they're a serious gardener, they might already have one. But this is the best. And that's all I'm going to say about it. And while I'm on my hands and knees too, I'm not getting any younger. I can overcome the getting all my clothes dirty by just going out in my gardening pants, right? And putting the right jeans on. But crawling around on the ground or sitting on the ground or kneeling on the ground for a long time starts to get a little uncomfortable. This is like a super cushy, what do they call it? They call it the super cushy pad. Where did they come up with a name so great as that? You can see how thick this thing is. They actually show kind of cool applications of it. Well, I suppose you might even be able to take it to the stadium and sit on it too. They got this guy on his boat, which I could use this on my kayak. You can kneel on it gardening. It's pretty sweet. Waterproof. It says washable. I suppose that means hose it off, but resists industrial chemicals, grease, and oil. I'm going to get this because I need a new kneeling pad, and I like the super cushy. So anyways, you're going to be on the ground. This keeps you warmer, keeps you drier, keeps your knees from dying from kneeling too long. And then, let's see where we're at. This is a watering wand. this comes in all kinds of colors. So this is where you can get like fun and fancy and match all of your tools to your like favorite color, or have a color scheme in your garden. A couple of different lengths of the watering wand as well. This is the long one, 30 inches. We love these tools for a lot of different reasons. Again, you've got a bed that's maybe 3-4 inches deep if you're in a raised bed, or you want to get closer to your plants with the water source to be more gentle with the water. You don't want to stand there and like stick your thumb in the hose and water your tender garden with that like same kind of stream as you would wash your car with. You're not going to do something like that. You're going to water your babies in with a deluxe berry color 30-inch dram rain wand. Rain wand, doesn't that sound good? You're giving them rain. Really fine breaker head for good water flow on off from right here. How awesome is that, right? So you can kind of even slow the water. I don't usually go in between. It's either on or off for me, but you don't have to run back to the nozzle or, to the spigot to turn it off. You could turn it off right here, which will save you water. And it's really lightweight. Metal, but plastic head. It's my only complaint. Dram. Cheaped out on some of the parts, but I understand because it's a really great product and we use them here at the garden center, and I love mine at home. So planting time, again, don't succumb to spring fever. Just because Walmart has tomatoes doesn't mean it's time to plant tomatoes. Just because you see pumpkin plants at Rite Aid does not mean it's time for pumpkin plants. And even though we have basil and tomatoes in stock at some of our locations today, they're in the greenhouse with signs on them that say protect from frost. And so we, take those messages and don't plant too early. Use your thermometer and also some common sense. As soon as you're dropping your jacket and not, running off with extra layers anymore, then we'll be thinking about the warmer season crops. We are in the wild ride of spring here in the Pacific Northwest. It's going to be like 76 degrees today. Yesterday we had a frost, and there's snow, 30 to 50% snow in the forecast for the weekend. So that's just snow flurries. Don't, keep your snow tires on. But Becky's checking her forecast because what? Nobody's expecting that right now. Average last frost in the Portland metro area is April 15th. So tax day, if you're into that, average last frost, so that's a big thing. Average, though, it could go, right, Becky? Yeah, well, still there. Monday. So your frost could go a little beyond average April 15th, could go, could dry up or warm up sooner, but it's smart to at least use that mid-April date to know that things are wild and wacky in the weather world on either side of that, give or take. We've had hail, we've had frost, and now, a beautiful sunny day. So can be crazy for plants that are just trying to make a baby, right? Just trying to grow a tomato. So there is a planting calendar that's attached to the handout. Basically talks about Willamette Valley planting dates. So if you are in another place, find your local planting dates, either from your extension agency or your preferred garden center. But for us, here we are in April, we can plant beets, broccoli, cabbage, carrots, cauliflower, celery, kohlrabi, spinach, corn, careful about corn, leeks, lettuce, fennel, onions, parsley, peas, potatoes, radishes, and on into May, tons more come onto that list. So again, what can be put in now versus what will be planted in another month. And in many cases, that means that you could plant something like a lettuce. Here's a loose leaf lettuce, Merlot. This beautiful red color on the leaf, which gives us extra anthocyanins, which are phytonutrients or antioxidants. Just know that they're better for you. Merlot lettuce is ripe in 55 days. So if we put it in today, we will be pretty much like at peak performance and readiness in 55 days, and then we can begin to pull the crop out, harvesting, and have space then to plant something else. But really, this is a leaf lettuce. So we don't have to wait 55 days. We don't have to start counting and being like, oh, in 3 more days, my lettuce is ripe. Well, you could start eating this lettuce today. You could eat leaves of this lettuce right now if you, because it's not going to make a head like a head of cabbage. It's just going to make a lot of leaves. So to harvest a leaf lettuce, you could either use like a nice piece of or a nice pair of shears. Little garden snips like this are great for just fine cutting. So you want to cut an outer leaf. You can harvest these outer leaves of lettuce early in the season, and the new growth continues to come out of the center. So a nice piece like this, I mean, this looks like it just came off of a restaurant plate, right? So this is perfect size, perfect ripeness and tenderness for eating, which means you could buy lettuce today, eat lettuce tonight, a few pieces, and expect to continually harvest off of it for the next 55 days as it gets bigger. Now, something like a pea, however, so here we are. We'll talk about seeds versus transplants in a minute. Peas, garden peas, are amongst the group of plants that are better planted by seed. So here we have a packet of pea seeds. This pack of seeds is $4.35 and sows, no, it's not going to tell us how much it's going to make, but there's a lot more seeds in here to make peas than there are peas that are going to be made from a 6-pack that is just a comparable price. $4.99 for a 6-pack, $4.35 for a packet of seeds. So first off, why seeds? Economics, right away. If you're looking to garden to save some money, then seeds are definitely a smarter way to go. Seeds will also allow you to make multiple plantings every few weeks, so that as peas become ripe, you will have peas that aren't yet ripe, and as the first planting wraps up its harvest time, you will have further younger plantings that are coming into peak season at the same, later on. So you'll stretch out your harvest time. However, because soil temperature at 45 degrees is the minimum to plant pea seeds, you may have wanted to already get pea seeds in the ground in order to be able to grow them, harvest them, and remove them from the space to allow yourself time to plant a warmer season crop. So 70 days to maturity on a packet of seeds here, which really only means after they have sprouted. So back up a sec and say, gosh, all right, look at my thermometer. If at 45 degrees soil, it may take 25 days for this package of seeds to sprout, then we're already almost a month past planting. Now in 70 days, my peas will be ripe. So you have to add that potential 28 days when you're planting in cool weather. So there's a delay there, which might make you want to, put in some grown peas as a cheat or as a start, or even, grown peas and seeds at the same time. Why not? If you are to buy grown started peas, try to get them as young and fresh as possible. Now I know from a nursery perspective, that just kills me to say, because we don't always have the youngest, freshest out there. Sometimes they start to grow because they grow fast, and once they've started to really root into the pod, they just don't transplant as successfully. Sometimes just show the stress of having been root bound in these tiny little containers. So buy small if you're buying peas in a transplant, and anything that's really better from seed. Always try to get the youngest, freshest crops if you're going to go for transplants instead. As mentioned, it is better to plant late. Better to wait until mid-May, late May to put in your warm season crops than it is to try to jump the gun and plant early. And that goes also for the fall and winter harvest season vegetables too. So so here we are in the spring. This is what we call the shoulder season. We have spring cool weather veggies. Then we go into summer warm season veggies. And then towards midsummer, as we go into the fall, we plant and prepare for the last season, which is the fall and winter season. So we really have two shoulder seasons of cool veggie gardening, and then the summer season right in the middle. It is why seeds and transplants? Economics is one. You have a wider range of plants that you can access through seed. I mean, you can order seed catalogs from, Spain or the UK. You can grow varieties that have been, heirloom, passed on from generations to generations. 50 different types of peppers, for example, by collecting and growing seed plants. But when you come in to buy transplant starts, what you choose is based off of what we have to offer. So your selection and your options are narrowed just by nature of what is grown for you from starts. If your soil is really heavy clay or compacted, that's also really hard for young tender seeds to grow into. So that's another best example of a garden that would be best planted with transplants. Bigger plants with a bigger root system can get through that hard, heavy clay soil. So maybe not so great for seeds in that instance. Corn, peas, beans, and carrots all do best when planted directly in the ground by seed, but most everything else is going to grow fine from starts. The transplants, again, are like for eggplant, pepper, tomatoes, melons, really warm season plants. We just don't have enough time in our season, in our growing season, to put a seed in the ground and expect that seed to germinate and grow and fruit or flower or reproduce before the end of our season. So then you need to just put a transplanted, start with a tomato plant versus a tomato seed directly in the garden because of the length of our gardening season. Helpful tips: select transplants that are green and healthy looking and small for the size of their container, right? So green and healthy looking, I guess I just wanted to make that a longer sentence. I hope we're all picking things that are green and healthy looking, unless they're not supposed to be green, right? So here's bull's blood beet. And bull's blood beet has this gorgeous, like burgundy purple leaf. Beets, another root crop, something that would be better grown from seed, but this is a very small, fresh pack. This would be okay to take home and try to transplant. If your soil's heavy, okay, blah, 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 corn, beans, avoid plants with yellow leaves or those that look old. Don't crowd plants. See reference books for correct plant spacing. Okay, we're going to talk about that in a minute. The tags or the packet of seeds are going to tell us a lot of information, like how long this takes to mature. So how long do we expect after planting bull's blood beet to be able to have a beet to eat? Don't laugh, Becky. 50 to 60 days till maturity is what it says on the label. Now it also says space 8 to 12 inches apart in rows 12 to 24 inches apart. So it doesn't mean you have to make multiple rows of beets. You could just do one row itself. And in that case, they're going to be 8 to 12 inches apart. Now, beets, as most of us know, are a root crop that develops similar to a carrot underground. However, beet greens, the leaves of beets, are also an edible, highly nutritious and tasty green. So you can eat the greens of the beets, but you're not going to take them all off. So similar to the leaf lettuce, as the beets grow, you could harvest some of the outer greens and add them into stir fries or salads, or just, put them on top of a meal to add some nutrition as well. It is important to note when you have a transplant or when you are growing from seed that some of the seeds are so tiny. You're gonna do your best to space the seeds out like the package tells you to. But then when you water, sometimes they move around. Not every seed germinates. And sometimes so many seeds germinate that you didn't expect. So whether it's from seed or from starts, you will need to thin the plants out as they grow. And so thinning on a beet really is eliminating some of the plants so that there ends up as one beet plant per 8 to 12 inches, allowing it to make a nice big beet. If they're all crammed together and we don't do any thinning, they can't, it's not like a cluster of grapes or something. They can't exactly make space for each other. The beets will all be smaller because they don't have the space that they need. So another case where these tiny little snips are very handy to get in here. And if we look at a transplant, one single cell here, we actually have 1, 2, 3, 4, there's 5 separate beet plants in this one cell. So that means, again, this is a 6-pack and we need to thin them down. At least on this side, we see where we have 2 decent looking plant starts and one kind of runty sprout in the center. So clearly I could thin out the one runty sprout right away, and it's so runty and easy I can do it with my fingernails. But this, remember, beet greens, delicious, nutritious. Don't compost it. Put it in your salad. Throw it in your mouth. It's edible. So as you thin and you think, oh, darn, I had to kill this. Well, you didn't have to kill it. You can eat it. Microgreens are, again, one of those things that's like huge gourmet these days. And this is essentially like one leaf past a microgreen. This is a baby sprout. Don't let it go to waste. But it's an important step of thinning. So now you don't have to feel so bad about thinning. That means we're going to be bringing in some greens for supper as we thin this one here. Because again, we want to at least get down to transplanting maybe 2 seedlings into the ground. But once these start to grow larger, we will have to pick one of these plants ultimately to be the remaining champion of that 8 to 12 inches and snip out the plant that has either now gotten smaller or grown sideways or just is not as perfect. You have to choose sometimes. So thinning, and again, using these little snips to get in there and cut easily is just a simple way of not cutting and actually taking something else out that you didn't mean to. Peas are one of the only crops that actually don't require thinning. So they can grow like an inch apart and be happy because most peas are growing vertically anyways. And they have these cool nitrogen fixing nodules in their roots that help them grab nitrogen straight out of the air. So they kind of do some of their own fertilization, which helps them deal with crowded situations. So peas, very cool for that. If we look here at this kale, we can see a couple of cool things. First of all, we can see some need for thinning. This guy here has gone all funky in its growth. So as we planted this particular seedling, kale and brassicas can be buried further up their crowns. So we could actually just plant this as this way and bury the soil all the way up, and it'll root a little bit along there. But here, another cell where we've got at least four starts growing together in here. 2 starts in this one, 1 runt and 1 champion. In this one, we've got 2 pretty good looking guys, a clear runt and a contender. But again, you got to make some choices here. So snip, snip. And now we have kale for our sandwich. Baby kale is really tender, right? As we all know. You could transplant too, as I mentioned with the beets, and then within the next couple of weeks, as they fill out and grow, ultimately you have to take everything out except for 1 plant and leave 1 plant remaining. On the tag, it's going to tell us plant 6 inches apart in rows 12 to 18 inches apart. So 6 inches apart for our kale. Six inches, right? So now you're planting, you're using your Hori, dig a hole, lay it down, 6 inches. Dig another hole. Now I can just go along and plant my kale. I often will leave 2 little young transplants as I plant because something might happen to one of them in the early vulnerable stages. A slug could come along and mow one down, or I don't know, whatever. So then kind of hedge my bets. And then, like I said, as they grow, one of them will clearly be like, I'm the one. And then you just snip out the other one as you're working in your garden and you see that they need the space. Thinning is important and spacing is important. We all know we wanted our own room as a kid. We all need our own space as grown-ups. And overcrowding is a problem even for vegetables. So don't overcrowd. And fall plantings. So we'll, again, focus on the season and take notes. Some plants are not going to do as well for you in the hotter weather. So cool season plants, even today, 76, and some of these, peas are going to be like, whew, I am not made for 76 degrees. I like it at 45. So again, kind of watch your plants, evaluate their progress, take notes. It's great to have a little journal of, you don't have to get all touchy-feely if you don't want to. You can just write it dates and stats. The day I planted, was it seeds or starts? What was the soil temperature? If you could check that. How long now do I expect it to be before it's ready? Or keep it in your phone, wherever you want to do. Take pictures as you plant. Take pictures of your garden maybe every week or every month to see the progress and gauge the changes. And that'll help you look back at the end of the season to evaluate all of the progress and the work that you did and whether or not you feel that it paid off, and make adjustments if you feel that it didn't. It's important, again, to start with easy things. Start with easy crops, right? You're not going to step into the kitchen for the first time and make beef Wellington. I don't know. I don't even know what that really is. I just made it up. Lobster bisque, right? We're not going to make something complicated the first time we try to cook something. So starting with basics, starting with easy things, and then working your way to intermediate and on into more advanced crops is going to build your confidence, keep you hooked on this absolutely worthwhile endeavor, and create that, what am I going to grow next year? Excitement instead of, gosh, I hope I can grow it this year. Disappointment that sometimes people have in gardening. So easy things, garlic, shallots, potatoes. It's perfect time to plant potatoes now. All kinds of greens, as I mentioned, and peas. You really can't go wrong as long as, again, you're timing. You're not going to have easy growing success if you're trying to plant peas in July. Well, actually, July's not bad, but June is too hot. So the right timing and the right crops, but starting with those easy crops. A little harder, some of the root crops. Carrots, onions. Squash are quite, not hard, but a little harder than easy. Snap beans, tomatoes, cabbage, cucumbers. Harder yet, broccoli, cauliflower, leeks, corn. And difficult in general for our area, peppers, eggplants, Brussels sprouts, melons, celery, fennel. I didn't even put okra on here because okra can be hard. It depends on how our summer is. Do we have a long, mild summer? Do we have a hot summer? Does it just end at the end of August and everything gets cold? Some crops, such as okra, want this extended long summer. Eggplants, love it hot. So we've got to wait until it's warm enough for an eggplant. Thermometer says eggplant, are you even in here? Well, okra, so okra will germinate in 60 to 100 degree soil. The ideal soil sprouting temperature for okra seed is 90 degrees, and at 70 degrees you can put okra transplants out into the garden. Crazy. That's 10 degrees warmer than a tomato can go in. So that is very cold. Eggplant are not on the list. Psst, worthless tool. You can figure eggplants are going to be close to what okra, somewhere between tomatoes and okra, right? So let's just go with that. Weeds and pests, they're guaranteed to be a thing. We have bred as farmers, the agricultural community, we have bred these plants to be soft and succulent, delicate leaves. People are like, oh, kale is hard and so chewy. Well, that's one of the things that we've been breeding out of plants is that hard, waxy leaf to make them more tender or more succulent, more delicate. That also makes them more easy prey for pests and insects. So a thicker, waxy leaf, a stronger leaf itself or stronger stem is less vulnerable to the chewing and kind of, sucking of pests versus something that's been so thin and bred to be, delicious and easy to digest. So it's natural that we're going to see pests and insects. Probably the most important for us in the Portland metro area, slugs are the ones that can do a lot of damage overnight. So we do suggest using a safe, organic or non-toxic slug bait. This is Sluggo. Slug Magic is an alternate product, both with the same base ingredient, iron phosphate. Little goes a long way, so this little can covers 1,000 square feet, and you would reapply it about every 3 weeks. They're granular, so they hold up pretty well in the rain, and it is has an attractant in it. So rather than putting it right around your plants, you'd be wise to kind of put it around the perimeter. Aphids can be, a bug that's all over plants at once and really grosses out a gardener, but most experienced gardeners don't get all up in arms about aphids. You can squish them. I know that's gross. You can spray them off, which is another just low impact, easy way to scatter them to the ground where they end up being eaten by a lot of things before they can make their way back up onto the plant. So you can do that over and over again and kind of knock their numbers down. And then there are beneficial insects like ladybugs that you can release into your garden to eat aphids. And there are insecticidal sprays that you can use. Once you have engaged yourself in using insecticidal sprays like neem oil, insecticidal soap, that will interrupt the natural cycle even of beneficials, which means that once you begin spraying, you'll probably need to keep a bottle of spray handy to take care of the rest of the pests in your garden yourself because you won't have the help of the other bugs around. There are a few pests that are confounding in general, and one is some of them are under soil, under the ground, so in soil. Cutworms are a big issue for folks, and so there is similar slug products. Sluggo Plus or Slug and Bug Magic are safe to use in your gardens, but also contain an ingredient that will kill soil-dwelling pests like cutworms. So you can do that. But then for spinach and Swiss chard and a few other kale in general, you can grow them under basically a mesh, under a netting or a mesh. And it's called a grow tunnel, something like that. And this guy is like 6 feet, 10 feet long, a little over a foot tall, nice, almost 2 feet wide hoops. And you would run this over a row of, I use it on my spinach, my Swiss chard, and my beets, because those 3 particular crops are greens. That really what I'm eating are the greens. Beets, I'm going to eat both, but they get a pest that lands on the leaf. It's called a leaf miner. This pest lands on the leaf and then lays an egg, and this little egg hatches into a worm that goes inside the leaf, as if in a single sheet of paper, suddenly there is another layer in between the paper. So the insect gets inside the leaf itself, which means that you can't spray it and you can't pick it off. And I just don't want to eat it. And that's the only other option. So in order to avoid the whole problem, I grow my plants in a little tent and nothing can touch them. So I can reach in there. It's a nice fine white screen. Air, sunlight, water goes through. I can lift it enough to weed or harvest through it, but then I pull it back down and keep the crops covered and protected. It's brilliant. And I have to thank my friend Jennifer for giving me the first one, and now it's just something that I successfully grow like the best spinach around, leaf miner free, because of that, and I don't have to use any chemicals. You will see again more information on your handout on frequency of harvesting and how important that is to harvest regularly. And then the last thing that I do want to mention is watering in general. Now, in-ground plantings are easier to keep watered because you've got the earth to kind of insulate. They don't dry out as quickly as above ground raised beds. A layer of mulch over top of the soil will do a lot to keep like summer beds from drying out so fast. That top layer that just gets baked in the sun will get hot and evaporate the water out. So a layer of mulch on top can reduce that evaporation and keep the plants just a little bit cooler and more hydrated. But a lot of us want to water with sprinklers or have some sort of automatic system set up, which isn't bad for short weekends to the beach or a little vacation, from watering. You can set up automatic watering. But we really like to suggest the importance of hand watering your vegetable garden. If you're out there hand watering, whether you're turning on soaker hoses and then kind of monitoring them, or literally hand watering with a hose, you have a constant ability to monitor things, to harvest, to weed, and to be out there regularly enough to gauge what's happening and catch things early enough, again, to be able to turn them around and stop problems before they become, epidemics. So I know that may require a lot of time, depending on whether or not you have it, but it's also important to gauge your commitment, your time commitment, and your ability to kind of follow through with the care, the harvesting, the weeding, the feeding, etc. And if you are concerned about that, then start small. And I guarantee you, just even one 4x10 bed, properly prepared, planted in appropriate times, and regularly fed through the season, you will be harvesting your own little bounty and looking to clear other things from your schedule in the future so that you can spend more time gardening. I truly hope that's the case. And as always, thanks for watching. Happy gardening.